One. Welcome to the iWrite Radio Videocast and Podcast Show. My name's Stuart Lochhead. I have three guests with me here today. We've got the gaffer himself, Norrie Stewart. How are you doing, Norrie?
No bad, Stuart. Voice is a bit iffy, but...
Oh, well. Phil Attridge. You doing all right, Phil?
Yeah, I'm doing fine.
And Jimmy Hutton.
All right.
How are you doing?
Oh,
Good man.
grumpy is a grumpy thing.
Grumpy is a grumpy thing. Sunday morning, so we had a bit of a look at Marr. I saw Ridge. We saw Starmer on the telly, and we also had John Swinney raising a few hackles, but we'll come to that. Then there's the so-called Salmond attack on Sturgeon, which, as far as I can see, that's one way of looking at it, but we'll come to that.
I see the Salmond inquiry has now morphed into the Sturgeon inquiry.
Is that right? But there's also the Salmond actually, his evidence, and the reason it's public is he had his evidence was to the Hamilton inquiry, which is into ministerial code, possible breach by Nicola Sturgeon, and it's being chaired by the former Director of Public Prosecutions for the Republic of Ireland, Mr. James Hamilton. Shall we start with Marr then, Norrie? Did you see Marr?
I did. I thought Matt Hancock was outstanding. I thought he spoke nothing but the truth. And I've got an appointment with my psychiatrist on Monday.
Yes.
It was the usual drivel. I can't help but notice that they're using Sturgeon's lines. I mean, I don't know if they've got somebody that kind of writes down everything she says to be gone over with a fine tooth comb. But very un-Tory-like, he was trying to, well, yesterday I think he was blaming the public. Today he wasn't quite sure, so I fully expect tomorrow that the public will be the last people to be blamed. Now, what he was actually blaming them for, I'm not sure. It might have been not going to work. It might have been staying off work. The whole thing was bullshit.
I think if you while you're there, Norrie, I think Steve Reicher, the sort of professor at St Andrews University, he was on the Scottish version of Politics Scotland, and he was very good this morning on the same topic about the public and compliance and things.
Yeah.
I wasn't impressed with Hancock at all.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I'd agree with that. Stephen Reicher got over a few, quite simply, clearly got over a few things that Matt Hancock couldn't get across to the public if he spent an hour and a half trying. We're seeing 90% compliance of lockdown. We see 30% compliance of self-isolation. And he puts that quite simply down to the fact that it's too difficult to access the financial support when you're told to self-isolate. So make it easier. Hancock couldn't possibly do that, primarily because Rishi Sunak doesn't want him to do that. I think it was interesting, as Norrie said about the blaming the public. We had Chris Whitty on the front, Chris Whitty on the front of the Telegraph this morning, basically blaming the public again, saying that the public are complacent. So I'm assuming that that's the way that Westminster's going to go this week before they almost inevitably have to impose an even tighter lockdown in England, because the lockdown isn't working there. The numbers are still jumping hugely, which they aren't in Scotland. I would suggest that, given the number of new cases, new positives, seems to be plateauing at the moment, but that's very early days and we can't take that for granted. But it's not happening in England, and the new cases are going through the roof. And frankly, the NHS in England is buckling under the pressure, certainly in London and certainly in the northwest, where they're already transferring patients into Dumfries and Galloway.
Jimmy, on behalf of the mainstream media, I'd like to point out to you, that's all ancient history.
Really?
We've now moved on to lack of vaccinations. We're ignoring the fact that per head of per head of population, we're doing better than everywhere else because
but
we can't
well-
actually prove we're not doing worse on infections.
well, we can prove that we've vaccinated 2.1% of the population of Scotland, whereas England's vaccinated 1.7. So regardless of how the Scottish media want to read that, that's actually a positive for Scotland. And wouldn't it be nice if the UK government could actually inform the Scottish government as to when the next scheduled arrivals of vaccine will happen? Because if they could, we could crack on with vaccinating many more.
I'm sorry, Jimmy. Once again, on behalf of the mainstream media, I'd just like
I
to
realised we
point
had a
out
spokesperson here.
that Nicola Sturgeon's got a crystal ball that she should use, that should be deployed when we ask these kind of unanswerable questions.
I think we need a cartoon from the cartoonist this morning.
Yeah, I can categorically point out that Nicola Sturgeon doesn't have a crystal ball, because if she did, she wouldn't have let Liz Lloyd drag her into the Salmond affair, but we'll get to that.
We'll get to that. But look, come on, Mr. Attridge, we need your point of view this morning too.
Well, with this, there's over 80,000 people now died in the UK. That's the latest figures, and it's.
Excuse me, on behalf of the mainstream media, I would.
But I've got a flanker there. I read it in the mainstream media, so they're probably underestimating. You know,
It must be one of these left-wing rags then.
I like the Telegraph or the.
Well, the Guardian probably are, yeah, sort of quasi sitting there. In the
No,
middle.
I said left-wing.
Yeah, that's left wing. No, it's never been left wing in its path. But actually, the whole thing, just the whole way the government's running it, it's all going to be a complete mess. Just this given 12 weeks between it. And as somebody said there, not enough vaccine. So giving it, so it couldn't make it up. The whole thing is just going to be a disaster. You can sit and talk about it all day, and it's just another cluster bleep.
Yeah, it's horrific, mate. I mean, watching Hancock, and fair play to Andrew Marr, he actually said to him, look, when you use these lateral flow tests that they're rolling out to people who can't work from home this week, and that was the big announcement they were trying to get across, but it fell flat the minute they done it. Marr says to him, look, they missed 60% of positive cases when you used them in Liverpool, to which Hancock's reply was, that's not right. Well, that's a report that was given to the government by SAGE when they looked into it. So for Hancock just to say that's not right is ludicrous.
It was
Frankly, I think they're rolling this out just as a sop. It's this look at the left hand while you didn't see what the right hand's doing, because we're not actually sure whether we can take the right hand out with our arse or not.
In fairness here, that expert from Liverpool University who said basically, okay, we only caught, well, actually, he said 2/3, didn't he? He said they caught 2/3 of the non-symptomatic people, asymptomatic people. So he did have a different view to what Marr was quoting.
Yeah, Marr was quoting SAGE. Marr was quoting the government's own investigation into how it had worked in Liverpool.
Well, he did. That guy, the Liverpool uni guy, was quite enthusiastic about the benefits of it.
Yeah, I kind of zipped through him because I thought, ooh, Liverpool uni. It's not the top uni on the planet, is it?
Come on, it's John Moore's university, isn't it? Or is that a different one?
But every university on the planet would tell you that their academics are the best on the planet because they employ them. But frankly, if you're employed at Liverpool University, you ain't the best. We'd just have to say that. That's just how it works.
I think you're right, Jimmy, though, about the situation in London and the likelihood of a UK or an England-wide ramping up of the restrictions. I'm not quite sure. John Swinney, when he was interviewed this morning, he suggested that they might be doing the same here in Scotland.
Yeah, John Swinney's doing that on a different basis, mate. I think John's, again, I think it's a squirrel that he's waving about with one hand because there's other things happening on the other hand. The numbers in Scotland, the death number was horrific Friday and Saturday, but the actual case numbers and the percentage of positive tests are looking relatively good given where they could have been. What we're now worried about is that these case numbers lead to a particularly large increase over the next couple of weeks in hospitalisations. If that doesn't happen, and the case numbers keep either stay similar or drop, then we might be looking at the first positive signs of this year, which would be somewhat different to what England's looking at the moment.
England,
Phil.
One of the main problems they got in England is not so much lack of hospitals, it's the staff.
Yeah.
The amount of NHS staff that are going down with COVID, and the amount that have got to isolate, so they're off for 2 weeks. I mean, they are getting on with vaccinating the staff. My sister-in-law, who's non-medical NHS staff, they've all been vaccinated because she works in the hospital. So they kind of getting on with that. It's just to try and keep the staff and ask it. And there's lots of staff doing double and treble shifts. You know, they're working literally every day. You know, so that's putting them more at risk.
They've cut it to the
January, February, end of March. I bet up here, or end of March and longer down there. But I reckon be end of March before he can hopefully get a pint of Guinness.
Well, they've cut their staffing to the bone in England in a way that we didn't here, and I think we're seeing the benefits of that. That we have excess capacity of both staff and beds that at the moment isn't being used, where large parts of England are, they're at 97, 95% of their capacity, and as you say, with the amount of staff that they've got off, they can't afford to go to 100% capacity because they've just not got the staff to cover the bed.
Don't forget that Scotland has also got a geographic advantage of time at the moment, a bit like the original first, when the pandemic first hit us. So we've got 2 or 3 weeks to see what's happening. But also I noticed Debbie Schrader, the darling of the media, she posted yesterday, and she seemed to think that Scotland was doing quite well.
Well, I can tell you on Thursday, I had contact with 4 different members of the NHS, an OT, a specialist nurse, and a physio, and my wife, all 4 of whom have had their first vaccine. None of them are, if you like, frontline to COVID. So I'm presuming all the COVID frontline staff got done first.
Yeah.
So that's Lothian Health Board. So they seem to be quite well on with it.
Do you think if we were all to swiftly change our names to Stanley Johnson, we'd get double jabbed pretty quickly?
Oh, don't get me started on that.
I'd
give it a double jab, but it wouldn't have been a vaccine.
Nice riposte, Phil.
I would hate to think that Stanley jumped to the head of a queue.
Right. Phil, did you see your friend Mr. Starmer on TV this morning?
No, you don't really need to listen to him to know the anodyne rubbish that's going to come out of his mouth. He's got the charisma of a brick. He really has, Sorry, I'd just fall back to sleep again if I watched it.
Well, apparently he'd announced his policy, whatever it is, his position on everything that matters in the Daily Telegraph. What's he trying to signal there?
Well, Tony Blair went to Rupert Murdoch and his son, didn't they? So there's a lot of precedent there. I mean, it's New Labour or maybe New Labour. I've got a funny feeling this is going to be New Labour plus, by the way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you're right. New Labour plus. It's got that nice wee
nasty
adman ring to it, though. And frankly, I'm no surprised he went to the Telegraph. It will be the Sun. He needs to court the Sun if he's ever going to have any chance of winning an election in England, which is all that he's concerned about. Frankly, I was surprised he even bothered to mention Scotland. Fair play to Andrew Marr for trying to get me to commit on anything. But he just waffled a load of crap because he knew that the end titles were coming up. Basically telling us, yet again, that Scotland will get what England gives them because it's inconvenient for him to talk about a referendum because he doesn't want to take a position. So,
well, it was a case of, it was a bit like now is not the time. But I did find when John Swinney was asked in the Scottish version of the BBC Politics show this morning, he was asked about IndyRef 2, and he said that to have an independence referendum would be a critical response to COVID, which I found quite interesting.
That's a line. That's not the first time that it's been said. So
That's a softening, isn't it?
well, no, I think what it is a way to justify a campaign. This isn't really about independence. This is about being independent enough to deal with COVID in our own way.
Oh, don't get me going on that.
Well, it seems like it might be they found a way to justify a campaign.
I didn't watch the entirety of this Swinney interview, I must confess. I kind of zipped through bits of it because I was ready to go and try and find them and ragdoll them up and down Regent Terrace. I thought he was disgusting in what he had to say about Salmond this morning, which we'll get on to. And frankly, the man has gone down so far in my estimations. He's not on the bottom of my shoe. He's on the stuff that's on the bottom of my shoe.
Can I talk a wee bit about the presenter of what used to be the Brewer Show, Linsey Bews? What did you think about the fact that this was a new face taking on a new job, an important job in Scottish politics? Impressions of her?
I think she's got more chance of getting the job than Gary Robertson because she's not quite as big an asshole. That's about as damning with faint praise as I could possibly get.
Her interruptions felt more professional. Can I put it that way?
I thought at one point she was looking for an SNP bad story. She was looking for them.
Actually, I mean, I never seen it, but she's looking for an SNP bad story. If you want an SNP bad story, basically ask any front-ranking SNP member to stab in the back, the one next to him, and so on. At the moment, they're giving them all the stories. I mean, I just find this unbelievable. Maybe the idea to have the election.
Well, what would you have people do? There are 2 parliamentary inquiries ongoing at the moment, and both of them are explosive. Would you have us all ignore whatever is said?
Well, the inquiries are going on. They haven't come to a decision yet. So
yeah, but would you have us ignore the evidence that's coming forward until such time as the whitewash is in?
Call me cynical, but it's powerful politicians. And sorry, I mean, we have plenty enough evidence. Doesn't matter whether they're good at their job or anything else. They're all the same, you know, when it comes to carving up the opposition. And as I always say, the opposition's the opposition. Your enemy's sitting right beside you or behind you. You know, this is a classic example. I just can't understand that whole way. I mean, they've obviously hated each other for a long time. Why not just tamp it down for a while? Just tamp it
down. Both of these inquiries have been set up and instigated by the First Minister, and both of these inquiries have to report before the Scottish election. They can't damp it down. They can't have it go away.
No, I can't. No. Well, look, let's start where the ground. You know, let's lay out the ground for this weekend's particular focus on this issue. You're right there, Jimmy. There are 2 inquiries. One of the inquiries is this one, which I mentioned at the beginning, which is by James Hamilton, which is into the possible breach of the ministerial code by the First Minister because she may have lied about something or not, either lied about a meeting or not taken notes. Now, Norrie, help me out here. Did you? We've got this really long bit of evidence given by the previous First Minister, Alex Salmond, to the James Hamilton inquiry. Loads of the unionist press have jumped on that and called it a Salmond attack on Sturgeon. But he had no option but to deliver this evidence to that inquiry and make it public.
I'm presuming you read the whole thing. It's on Wings Over Scotland.
Yes.
The whole publication.
There's a lot. No, that's not it all. There's a lot more than that.
Oh, well, sorry. Wings lied to me then. But what I read on Wings, which was much fuller, is not what I read in the headlines. 2 things I'll say about it.
No, it's not.
One is Salmond watered it down slightly and over the whole piece. And Salmond knows it's not evidence, it's Salmond's opinion. Salmond has actually said, can you possibly believe what she said? He hasn't said, I have 5 witnesses that know this not to be true. He's just said, I don't believe it, and you shouldn't believe it either.
Oh, well,
That's the
hold
first
it, Norrie. He said he has 3 witnesses. Not 5, but 3.
Are
There
we
are 3
talking
people
about
that
different things here?
possibly, but I'm going with the thing that she didn't know. And she did, because that was clear when she spoke to Jeff Aberdeen, and he spoke
Okay.
to Salmond's solicitor, and one other on that day.
The point I was going to go on to make about that is there are things that quite simply you cannot know what she knew or didn't know. You just have to believe what she says or not. That's the first thing. The proof is never going to be there. It's just because there isn't a witness between 2 people having a conversation.
Oh, excuse me, a
So
couple of
the
minutes.
proof is never going to be indisputable. So there is always going to be around this.
Okay, but there's the question about whether the meetings she did have over, was it the 2nd of April 2018 and the 29th of March and the 2nd of April 2018, were they about SNP business, therefore they should not be minuted in the Scottish Government record, or were they Scottish Government business, and therefore her husband Peter Morrell knows nothing about it, and he was telling the truth?
Well, that is opinion. I'm sorry. She can turn around and say, well, I thought it was SNP business.
Now that's where you're wrong, Norrie. There are witnesses. There are witnesses to what happened at those meetings, and and Jeff Aberdeen has actually already given evidence in the criminal case.
You're doing what the papers are doing. You're deciding. You're deciding. You know that is a hard and fast fact. It's not a hard and fast fact. There is going to be an overlap between the politics of it at SNP level and the politics of it at government level. And if Sturgeon chooses to turn around and say, no, this was all about the SNP and the party, that's fine. That's what she believed.
Oh, no, I agree with you. Sorry, Phil. I can see your hands up.
Just that it's right. The inquiries are still ongoing. Okay. They're still listening to the evidence. As far as I know, no conclusions have been reached. They haven't published any conclusions. And they're listening. And all that's happening now is just the different factions in there bringing out stuff into public, wait for the conclusions. That's when you should have the argument, whether you agree or not on the conclusions of the inquiry. And then, this is a great idea, then you can have another inquiry, you see, to look into those inquiries, you know.
That's what they do in the Labour Party, isn't it?
You know what? I'm sitting here and I'm, just listening to it and I'm thinking, and I've got a distinct feeling of deja vu. Corbyn and the Labour right wing and the Israeli embassy, I mean, you've only had it. This is exactly the same thing, monstering, and all you're doing is ripping yourself apart. The latest polls, and then you look at Boris and that down there, the latest polls that came out, I can't remember who did it, but it puts the Labour Party about 2% higher than Boris, it's specifically Boris, if they had an election now. The SNP get every seat bar 2. And all the rest of it. I quite like that, so I believe the poll. And it's still unbelievable that almost the same amount of people, percentage, support Boris than Starmer. It does look more boring and competent, but that'll do me.
But to go back to this point, it's actually, I would imagine that the next poll that comes out that covers Sturgeon's popularity will not have been dented in one bit by this.
I think you're right. I don't think it's going to dent her at the moment. And there's also, given the remit of the 2 inquiries that already exist, and the evidence, the suggestions that we've heard so far, I think you're right, Norrie. I don't think anything serious will come out of this at the moment.
And we're blowing off steam about what is a normal process. The only party that doesn't throw themselves on the mercy of an inquiry is the
The
Tory
Tories.
party.
Well, look,
They
I
do
think
it
that
in hotel rooms behind closed doors.
you know who our enemies are, and they're either the British state or the media, and in particular, this is a media stooshy this weekend, which the opponents of the SNP and of independence have used the evidence that Alex Salmond presented to one of these inquiries and called it an attack. And of course, that's what's fired off a lot of people that don't actually go on social media and they don't actually read below the headlines.
Well, most people don't read below the headlines, Stuart. I keep saying to everybody, I tell my children at least once a week, read the headline, go to the last 2 paragraphs. That's the way you do it. But this is not nearly as deadly as the likes of Alex Massey in The Spectator hopes it is.
What a terrible piece that was.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, the beginning of that piece, I agree with Wings. The beginning of the piece was fine. And then he did what, it doesn't matter which side you're on, by the way, of this argument, what everybody on either side of the argument's done is they've gone to what is their truth, not the truth, what they perceive as the truth. And they've repeated it as though it is the truth. Well, it isn't. And I'm sorry, life, and especially political life, is messy. There is going to be no definitive outcome to this.
Norrie, do you think Craig Murray's decision to publish slightly more WhatsApp messages was a bad move, or do you think he's taken a look at the case being dismissed against Mark Hurst and taken a gamble and said,
I haven't seen
I
it.
can put a bit more in the public domain?
What more has he put in the domain? Sorry, Jimmy, I missed that.
Yeah, I thought you had, Stuart. I kind of directed people to Craig Murray's Twitter on Friday night. He put a bit more out there where saying that there were WhatsApp and text messages between Peter Murrell and Mr. McCann, the SNP compliance guy, and the other, is it Barbara something or other, O'Connor or something like that? Basically, Mr. Murrell was directing Mr. McCann, who sat on the initial allegation, to encourage what he went to dinner with one of the
who did, McCann or Murrell?
McCann at the direction of Murrell and is it O'Connor? I keep forgetting her name. And he was basically being encouraged to keep her on side, make sure that she would be compliant with their wishes and staying on course to accuse Salmond. And frankly, Mr. McCann also got messages, according to Craig Murray, that Mr. Murrell and the SNP were a little disappointed and didn't think he was trying hard enough. Now, these are we've always known that Wings has seen a lot more than we have, because Wings has been adamant from the start that Nicola Sturgeon was in this up to her neck. Craig Murray's also said today on his Twitter feed that Nicola Sturgeon is behind this conspiracy. I believe that's the first time I've heard him say that he is sure she is behind the conspiracy to put Alex Salmond behind bars. So do you think that more is going to come out into the public domain during his case this week?
Is he in court this week?
I believe he's in court on Wednesday, Stuart.
Okay, Craig Murray. So that's in my diary along with everybody else. So we've got
right. No,
Leslie Evans on Tuesday in the inquiry, the Holyrood inquiry, harassment inquiry. You're saying Craig Murray's in court on Wednesday.
I believe
a week on Tuesday
this week.
A week on Tuesday we've got Alex Salmond at the inquiry, and 2 weeks on Tuesday we've got First Minister at the inquiry. It's going to be an interesting couple of weeks then.
And none of it will make any difference.
Norrie, were you not taken aback by what Nicola Sturgeon's spokesperson had to say on Friday, and what John Swinney had to say this morning?
Said this morning.
Does that not matter to you?
I'm not taking, Jimmy, this is politics.
Yeah, but
Politicians. Salmond's grinding his axe, Sturgeon's grinding her axe. You know, what
yeah, but
surprises me is
Sturgeon's axe is basically, I don't believe the court. I believe the conspirators. I don't believe the jury. I believe those who were found, whose stories were found non-credible by the jury and the judge. Nicola Sturgeon is not entitled in any way to set aside a High Court verdict.
Didn't say that.
No, Nicola Sturgeon's not going to say that. She sent a spokesperson out to say it for her.
It's politics. And it's
one of the
nasty...
That's why I'm not a politician, mate. I'm still an old school man. If Nicola Sturgeon had made those kind of aspersions against me, I'd go and find her husband and punch his lights out, because I'm not allowed to go and punch her lights out.
Let me just see what John Swinney said this morning. He said I'm on with Jimmy on this. All he said was he didn't deny what had been said by Alex Salmond in his published evidence. But he said that the First Minister is an honest and candid politician, and the First Minister is focused on the coronavirus pandemic, and that it's. So then she was asked, would she resign if she'd broken the ministerial code? Was by Linsey Bews. John Swinney, absolute nonsense. Bad behaviour has been conceded in court. So, and then he said also that the terms of reference, which was one of the questions, the terms of reference of the ministerial code inquiry, the question was, will that be extended? And he said it was already extended, but I don't think that's terribly relevant.
Stuart. I think he lied to the public this morning. A parliamentary answer to a question does not extend the remit of a parliamentary inquiry. That remit is instructed by a parliamentary instruction.
Well, it has to be the First Minister, because she commissioned that inquiry into the ministerial code.
Apparently not. Hamilton's got the authority to extend it if he chooses, apparently.
Yeah, I know Nicola Sturgeon has said that in public, and John Swinney said something similar this morning, but unless they instruct him that he can do that, I'm not certain that he, as a former DPP or whatever he was, will do so. That's where the semantics are going at the moment. And John Swinney, for John Swinney to say, a lot of which have now been conceded in court. That was the same line that we got for the First Minister's spokesman on Friday. I'm sorry, what Alex Salmond conceded in court was one particular allegation that he conceded things had gone too far. That's not a lot, that's one. And using that language deliberately,
but Jimmy,
throw mud. No, sure, Martin, let me finish. The man was found innocent, and they're slinging mud, and they're slinging the same mud that the court's already rejected. Why are they doing that?
Because it's a dirty game, politics.
This isn't a game. They were trying to put a man in jail.
It's a dirty game, politics. Mm-hmm. It's that simple, Jimmy. Yes. If you've got a stain on your character and you're standing in an election, your opposition is going to point it out.
Alex Salmond is standing in no election.
And this
has all come about for the paranoia of Peter Murrell and his missus.
Fuck. Jesus. I do not understand why the only people that have to be fucking whiter than white in this world are the SNP leadership.
I'm not saying that they have to be whiter than white. What I'm saying is they got paranoid about Salmond possibly coming back, and they decided to stitch him up.
I'm not denying that possibility.
They used the women, they used the police, and they've used the Crown Office to protect Nicola's position.
Well, that becomes the biggest the biggest scandal of all. If they have done what you've just said, Jimmy.
That's the word. If.
Well, that's how it looks to me, and I'm perfectly entitled to say that, unless somebody wants to come to my door and have a problem with it.
Nobody is denying your right to talk about it, Jimmy. All I cannot understand, and I haven't been able to understand from the start. In fact, I think I may well have said it's been a fault with the SNP, trying to appear whiter than white, bumping some guy because of a mistake in the automatic texting. things like that. You know, I mean, in a way, they've been hoisted on their own petard. We now expect them not to act like politicians. I'm sorry. You can't survive in politics in the UK unless you act like a politician.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd agree with that. But Nicola in particular has called for the resignations of half the bloody Scottish Parliament in her time there. She's been there 20 years and she's called for an awful lot of resignations.
Exactly like every other politician in Parliament.
She very well may be hoist on her own petard, mate, because she was the one who absolutely slated Henry McLeish for what looks like a minor accounting difficulty.
These days, it looks like nothing.
That'll be the financial fraud.
Well, it wasn't very much. Just a minute. Just a moment. Given that most politicians are now lying through their teeth at a level that we're just not used to, especially at Westminster, without a doubt, with that background, the First Minister will be able to brush off most of what we've heard in public so far. But I have to agree with Jimmy. If what Jimmy says is true, the police service and the Crown Prosecution Service have been involved in this, that becomes a very serious scandal indeed.
I think I was quite annoyed at some of the stuff that, you know, people's reactions. Aye, people are going to react. Some of the stuff that people had to say on Twitter was most entertaining, particularly dafties like Kirsty Blackman, who just hasn't got the brains to put her fucking phone down. Doll, you stepped out of frontline politics because you said you had issues. Stay out of frontline politics for a while. Stay off Twitter. Do us all a favour. But I was quite concerned that so many people are quite happy to turn a blind eye to all of this because the polls look good. You're basically saying that Nicola can do anything she wants because the polls are looking good. And that is cultist behaviour.
What I'm pointing out is the truth. If she can get away with it, she'll get away with it. If she can't, she won't.
Yeah, but Norrie, that's when people start accusing us of being a cult. When we say that Nicola should not be held to the standards that she herself has called for other people to be held to because she's popular.
Fuck.
For Christ's sake, Adolf Hitler was popular. Donald Trump was popular.
Jimmy, none of this am I disagreeing with. I'm telling you, real politic here. Look what the Tories have done, are doing, and will do in the future. I mean, for Christ's sake. So she's got to be Joan of Arc.
No, she's not got to be Joan of Arc, but she certainly doesn't get to be judge, jury, and executioner of Alex Salmond, and that's what she tried to be. Do you seriously think, for example, that James Wolfe in any other administration would still be in his place? He just cost the Scottish public purse 25 mil minimum, and he stays in position as head of the Crown Office and Procurator Fiscal Service because he's covering her arse over Salmond.
Jimmy, if she stays in charge of the SNP and stays as First Minister, are you going to vote no at the next Indy Ref?
Absolutely not. It's nothing to do with how I vote.
So I just don't understand why people expect her not to act like a politician.
Well, okay, look, come on, guys. Can we just move on? Because we're going to sum up and let's try and leave it in a slightly better humour because we're never going to end this. We've got plenty more to discuss. May I bring in the May elections and the row about postponing them?
Till October.
And Phil, you know about this. You're aware of the fact that the unionists here are trying to postpone the May elections here in Scotland.
I mean, they can send everybody out a postal vote if they're worried about people contacting. I mean, because people are registered, so they've got an address. They can do it if they want. Yeah, I think it's just something else. But in one way, after the discussion we just had, leaving this off till October, by which the protagonist we should have the conclusions of the inquiries and won't keep kicking bells.
And I wouldn't guarantee that. There is an argument, of course, Phil, about this that it benefits if there is a ahead that benefits the incumbents, because there won't be any, it's unlikely to be any door knocking. So that the politicians already in post, in England, but that would be councillors, and the existing MSPs in Scotland, they would have an advantage over any challenges. How do you see that?
Well, I've already had election stuff through from the SNP. There's been plenty of stuff, social media coming up for Labour. I've had there's Tory stuff. Wee Willie What's it? He's put round wants to talk to people. Yeah, they're into it. We're doing postal ballot. We can do it. But on a COVID basis, that's the excuse they're using because of COVID. And May, well, I reckon we're going to be in lockdown. I think you're going to see sunshine till April. So they might have a point, but
no, they don't have a point. It's a point.
I think personally, I think it's a unionist bit. There's points, but I'm sorry, I can see the main one sitting up there. We can use this so we can shaft them.
They want it delayed because they think the more time they have till the next election, the more likely it is the SNP will implode.
I think that. Yeah, that's really why I wanted to bring this. But on you go, Jimmy.
Well, let's be clear. It won't be October. If they delay, it's going to be for 6 months. Are we really suggesting that we have a November election in Scotland? I know we had it with a general election a couple of years ago, but the turnout was horrifically poor. No, we shouldn't delay. And frankly, as I've said before, if the Americans can count 160 million votes for president, God only knows how many they counted for the Senate. Surely we can count 2.5–3 million votes at max in a Scottish election. And frankly, the nonsense about COVID is exactly that, nonsense.
Yeah.
When you walk in to cast your vote, every single polling station, you're automatically socially distanced. You didn't look over somebody's shoulder at what they're voting. You're not allowed to. They make sure of it.
And you don't get in. You don't get into the building. You're in large numbers.
Exactly. They're already set up to be socially distanced. So that's a nonsense, mate.
And they've already what legislation they've already passed to prepare for the possibility of problems for this May election is they've already passed the legislation to spread it over 3 days of voting if necessary.
Could I suggest that even the hint of it was actually laid out in 2 separate pieces that were on Marr this morning, where English councils don't want to increase their council tax by 5% this year because there are elections, but they desperately need to increase their council tax by 5% this year because they're all running close to bankrupt. So if the English elections are cancelled, it will be so they can whack in a council tax release and hope to Christ that punters have forgot it 6 months later. Because if the council tax goes up, it goes up in April, you vote in May. That's what's behind all this nonsense.
There's no way that the Tories are going to take a chance on Labour getting ahead of them. So the English council elections will go ahead. If that happens, the Holyrood elections will go ahead. But it's going to be great fun watching the unionist parties spin on the head of a pin, trying to come up with reasons why Scotland's different.
Aye, because they will actually try. The sad thing is they are that anal. They will desperately try and find an excuse to go ahead with elections in England and cancel them in Scotland.
That's politics now. Unionist politics now is delay everything they can.
I would give that just something else to bring up because I see the time we've got. But anybody see the Daily, the Express? You know that.
Well, I thought we might finish with that. Yeah,
they're all fuming and going mad. You can hear them.
Well, let me introduce this piece because this is the first time I have read the Daily Express in at least 10 years. Now, and obviously I didn't go out and buy one, so I went onto the Daily Express on the internet, and I was amazed. It is impossible to read anything below the headline. It's just non-stop diversions here, there, and everywhere. Unless you've got something that bans ads, you can't read it. But so I spent the time, I extracted it all and shared the meat of it to you guys, and it's fabulous. If this is what the people are reading, no wonder they're voting for Trump and voting for Boris.
Oh, yeah, but it's obvious as well. He's a good target because don't forget, keeps referring to that island that everybody knows England owns, but the Irish think it's theirs. Yeah, it's the
Well, I better read out the headline, Phil. Britain's notice, furious amid claims Biden may snub Boris for Sturgeon. Keep your nose out. Britons have reacted with fury amid claims President-elect Joe Biden may snub Boris Johnson to support Nicola Sturgeon's Scottish independence bid. Now, that's great news for us, isn't it?
Do I?
No, it's a crock of shite written by an idiot. Biden is Irish, and Biden will have pro-Irish sympathies. That's guaranteed because he's always considered himself Irish American. The fact that he may want to speak, well, the fact that he might want to speak to Nicola Sturgeon at some point in the future hasn't even been spoken about. This is just the English whipping up anti-Scottish and anti-Irish hysteria so that people didn't look at their leaders and go, by Christ, we're led by a shower of clowns.
Well, can I quote? I mean, they pulled out, right, the spokesperson that's entirely based on, is he a professor? But he's a guy, Ronald MacDonald, research professor of macroeconomics at Glasgow University's Adam Smith Business School. I don't think he's a fan of the SNP, is he?
I recognise the name. I can't remember the context.
It's got nothing to do with McDonald's.
I know.
He's got clown feet and sells burgers, and his opinion, actually, the McDonald's clown would probably have a clearer opinion of what Joe Biden might want to do over the first 90 days.
Anyway, it's one of these stories. I've got to, come on, I'll read out a couple of the things. Following his remarks, anyway, I mean, we're agreed. The basis of this story is rubbish to start with. And so then they go and they find, following his remarks, readers expressed their outrage. That says potential snub to the UK. One said Biden is going to be like Obama, a swaggering, arrogant tool. Another said he should keep his bloody nose out of UK business. The third says, when did the world allow the USA to butt into other countries' business affairs?
Excuse me, did David Cameron not invite Obama to butt into the UK's business during the Scottish 2014 referendum?
I thought I'd just warm the cockles of our viewers and listeners because we know what their slant is.
I didn't realise it was the Express when you put it up, or I wouldn't have read it.
I didn't think the Express even bother to go and get people's opinion. I think they just write the opinion piece, the quotes that they want, because they know that they're going to get even bigger clowns than the ones that they've just invented below the byline in the comment section.
They'll just go around the guys in the office who are the only people that actually read the Express and say, you're an Express reader, what's your opinion on this?
Exactly, that's all they do. They don't even bother. They just, I think Jimmy's right. And they just sit there and invent things. I tell you what's in the Beano and the Dandy has got more truth in it than the Daily Express, if that's what typical. I think we better wind up. We're almost up to the hour. Sorry, Jimmy.
No, I was just going to say, if you ever deign to go near the Express or the Mail online again, AdBlock Plus is a thing for you, mate.
I don't think you're allowed to read it unless you let the ads up. That might not be the Express, not my go-to place.
Hence the reason I've got AdBlock Plus on every bit of kit that I own, mate, so I didn't have to read shit like that.
Thanks very much, Jimmy Hutton. Thank you, Phil Attridge. Thank you very much, Norrie Stewart. My name's been Stuart Lochhead. Are we ready to wind up, Mr. Stewart there?
We are. We'll call it a day at that, and we'll see you all tomorrow.
1:30.
Thanks for listening.
Bye.
Nearly.